Well, good evening and welcome to Hornbake Library. My name's Daniel Mack. I'm the Associate Dean for Collection Strategies and Services in the University of Maryland Libraries. On behalf of Babak Hamidzadeh, Dean of Libraries, and all of the personnel of the University of Maryland Libraries, I'm very pleased to welcome you to our featured exhibit for the 2016-2017 academic year, Frederick Douglass and Wye House, Archaeology and African American Culture in Maryland. As many of you know, Frederick Douglass has been receiving a good deal of notice on this campus. The university recently embarked on a mission to recognize the historical legacy and modern relevance of this great Marylander. The most visible accomplishment of this campus-wide initiative has been the creation of Frederick Douglass Square on Hornbake Plaza, highlighted by the dramatic statue of Douglass himself that was dedicated last year. And yes, who hasn't had their picture taken next to Mr. Douglass yet? If you come down here during commencement, this is where everybody's having their cap and gown pictures taken now, standing next to Mr. Douglass. So it's a great new tradition. We at the university libraries are very honored that the Frederick Douglass statue has been so prominently placed in front of Hornbake Library. And here in Hornbake Library, Mr. Douglass's legacy is preserved in many primary collections that feature or that facilitate exploration of issues related to slavery and freedom in American history, social justice, and the struggle for equal rights. Frederick Douglass spoke eloquently and forcefully about these issues, and the staff of the university libraries has been a key campus partner in the dialogue at a time when the news headlines remind us that we still struggle with unresolved questions concerning equality and justice. Now, Doug McElrath, Director of Special Collections and University Archives, is here to tell us a little bit more about some of our partnerships. Doug?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased to see all of you here tonight, and I just want to take a few moments to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the libraries to really carry on what we see as the mission of Frederick Douglass. This fall, we're involved in a project called Democracy Then and Now, which is an initiative based in the College of Arts and Humanities. And this project really seeks to help students connect specific locations here on campus with the broader role of the public university in educating a democratic citizenry. The students are using our university archives collection that's based here in this building and other sources to better explore this theme. Previously, our Library Media Services Department, which is based in the ground floor of this building, has collaborated with anthropology professor Judith Friedenberg, who's here tonight. I see her right there standing next to the Frederick Douglass, to collect and preserve the testimonies of recent immigrants living here in Prince George's County. Yet another topic that has a lot of resonance in our current national debates. This past Tuesday, we hosted Professor Friedenberg as part of our Speaking of Books series, where she discussed her recently published book based on this project. And this exhibit is the result of a partnership of the libraries with Professor Mark Leonoe and his colleagues. The historical legacy of slavery is very much a part of our national conversation about who we are and what we stand for. Mark's work at the Wye House plantation is an important part of that conversation because it shows us that American culture grew out of contributions from both races. This joint legacy was created at the very place that shaped Frederick Douglass and left him with lasting memories that he used in his writings throughout his life. Mark will explain how this exhibit accomplished this much more eloquently than I can, but before he does, I just wanted to recognize some of the members of the exhibit team that helped put it together. As some of you may know, exhibits are the products of many hands, and the staff in Hornbake and elsewhere in the libraries have been working hard and hand in glove with Mark's team to transform our exhibit gallery into something truly special that you're seeing tonight. I especially want to recognize our instruction and outreach coordinator, Laura Cleary, and her staff, who worked with Patrick Rogan and his company from assemblenet.org. Those two really do deserve the lion's share of credit for turning the concepts behind this exhibit into what you're seeing tonight. The list of the many contributors is extensive, and you will find them listed on a credits panel that's just to the left of the entrance door to the gallery. From the libraries, I want to be sure to note the contribution of our book and paper conservator, Brian Draper, who prepared the rare books and manuscripts for display. Cindy Frank from our architecture library, who allowed us to borrow the very magnificent copy of Palladio that you'll see in the exhibit. Amber Cole for her logistical advice, and Rebecca Wilson, who designed the publicity, and Christy McDermott and staff, who all helped make the arrangements for tonight's event. Now, soon you're going to hear from Mark Leonoe, who seems like he had an army of people collaborating with him on this project. The breadth of his team is proof that projects like this are successful because they're so inclusive. But there's one person who is the driving force behind this exhibit and the research for the Archaeology in Annapolis project, and that is Mark. So to introduce him and to offer his welcome, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Gregory Ball, who's the Dean of Behavioral and Social Sciences here at Maryland.
Thank you. So I have the privilege of being Dean of the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. I'm beginning my third year here. And one of the things you do when you're a dean is you try to understand your departments. And I had a lot of experience with anthropology departments at other universities, and I was curious to understand how anthropology, what areas it followed and what it embraced here at Maryland. And one of the things I was delighted to see and to learn about was that the archaeology program is proud of its heritage archaeology program. And they have a connection with our nearby cultures and trying to understand the world that we all live in. I'm actually native Washingtonian who grew up in Maryland, and so the state and its history was something which I encountered in school and on trips and spent a lot of time in learning about. But as I learned about the different layers, it was very clear that the legacy of slavery, its many different dimensions, and what it meant for the state had not been appropriately appreciated and understood. And I was delighted when Mark told me about the project he had going on at Wye Manor. And I quickly joined in support of the Frederick Douglass statue. I think it's entirely appropriate the flagship campus honor one of the great Marylanders who did so much for our country. And this exhibit is something I was enthusiastically supporting because this connects us to our past in the state. And there are many complexities to it, and it's one we need to understand. It's not perfect in all ways, but we should be proud and celebrate, even with the blemishes, the many different contributions the people in our state have made to that culture. And I firmly believe that this kind of understanding will help us today embrace a diverse university. And I can't be more pleased with Mark's leadership and the Department of Anthropology, and I see this department is continuing to grow in this dimension in a way that will make it one of the best departments in the country. So I'm very pleased to welcome Mark to the podium.
Thank you all for coming. I want to begin by acknowledging both the gift of support from our provost and the fact that she's here tonight to welcome all of you, Mary Ann Rankin. I have three things I want to say in a fairly speedy fashion. What this exhibit is all about is this. My model for education through museums is Charles Willson Peale. A polymath, a genius, not only a painter of all of the leaders of the revolution, or most of them, but the founder of the first museum. He was a Marylander, but he put the first national museum together in the long hall on the second floor of Independence Hall. At the top of the rows of cases were his own paintings and character studies of Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, and every other major American who created a republic. And he felt his job in this museum was to teach people who had not been citizens to be citizens. He is my model. He is an amazing Marylander. However, when you adopt a model, you adopt the model's problems. His slave made the takeaways, the postcards, but they were silhouettes. They're brilliant. I was trying to figure out, through the major biography yesterday of Peale, who did this. The major biography does not acknowledge either the status or the name. That's the problem this exhibit attempts to fix, because this is about citizenship as well. So the problem with Charles Willson Peale is this, and this is the nugget. One was to become a citizen by looking at the deep character studies of the paintings he made of the leaders who made a new nation and new citizens. So the issue is, the takeaways are acts of genius themselves, but unauthored. If you took a silhouette away, you were to look at yourself and see whether or not you measured up. That was what that museum did. Here, using the concept of culture within anthropology, my 5 graduate students and I have attempted to do the same thing by understanding the insides of a culture created by Africans, African Americans, and people of European descent at Wye House, an enormous population of Lloyds and people whom the Lloyds in their censuses said had first names and last names. In a deposit, which is here, we discovered a set of cosmograms, wheels, circles, and ultimately the wheel. But it is the wheel that links to the Hebrew Bible through the book of Ezekiel that may be a hint as to how people from Africa created, and this is different, a different kind of Christianity. The black church, a different concept of what the other world called Christian is. And you can see that here, but that's what the exhibit is all about. So the job of anthropology is to look within and to find something else to describe so that we know who we are better, and that's my hope here. There was a lot of help, and I'll introduce the key people who are my teachers in this. The second thing I have to say is my students. This is the product of 5 doctoral students from anthropology, and I'm happy to say properly, Dr. Amanda Tang, she finished. Dr. Elizabeth Pruitt, she finished. Their work is there. Ben Skolnick will finish soon. Stefan Wolke will finish soon, if I have anything to do with it. Tracy Jenkins is here, and he doesn't need my foot in his bag. He'll do it on his own. Patrick Rogan created this glorious visual display, and Barbara Peka, who I think is not here, showed me Ruth Starr Rose, whose prints are in here, and that is how I got to the living wheel. The third and final thing I want to say is to my own family. This happens to be, ever so serendipitously, the 2nd anniversary of my sister's passing, but her children are here, and I want to welcome them. So I want to welcome Chris Leonoe and her partner, Annette. I want to welcome Chris's children, Nicholas, Andrew. I want to welcome Ellie, who's named after my own mother. I want to welcome her son, Paul, and Jennifer and Amanda, his daughters. And I want to welcome Joe Feeney, who is here as well. I have to say, I couldn't do any of this without my wife, Nan Wells, and I want to thank her sister, Sarah Meyerhoff, for coming to this. I want to close by saying what any anthropology major knows: kinship is a fraud. It links us because we make it link us. It isn't biology, it's invented. So on that basis, and on that proud note from our from our field, I want to thank my kindred in anthropology for coming. Carmel Schroer from Rutgers, Irving Zaretsky, with whom I did a book long ago, from San Francisco, and Maury Offit for coming all the way from California in the rainstorm. So let me now introduce the next speaker, who is Harriet Lowry. Harriet and her aunt, Martha Ray Green, are the actual real reasons that any of this works. I met her aunt at St. Stephen's AME, and her aunt said to me, Martha Ray Green, I would want to know about slave spirituality. The answer is in here. Harriet, standing on her own, is the major force behind the statue of Frederick Douglass in Easton, a serious accomplishment, and that is the model that I have tried to work out here for this part of the exhibit that is an internal celebration of Frederick Douglass and his importance to all of us. Harriet?
Hi, everybody, or rather, good evening. I am so honored to have been invited to speak at the opening of this grand and important exhibit. As a member of the Frederick Douglass Honor Society, I am so proud to celebrate Frederick Douglass, an American hero. I invite you all to come to Easton, on the Eastern Shore, and view the statue that we have of our native son in his own county. There are several members of our community here who can tell you about some of the struggles and obstacles that we endured in erecting the statue. But we also have wonderful stories of hard work, belief in the project from many faithful people that brought our project to a successful unveiling in 2011. Sometimes I have a little bit of a problem deciding whether this one is better than ours or ours is better, but you have to see both. The good thing about it is, one is when he was younger, and ours is when he was older and invited back to Talbot County to speak at the courthouse. And so now I can say both of them I love. I'm also speaking this evening as a 7th generation descendant of an enslaved African on the Wye plantation. I stand here today in the gap for him and all the ancestors before me to connect the past with the present and pass it on to generations after me. I hope to do my part in never letting the story of the past define who we are. I stand in the gap hoping to continue telling the story. I tell their story because our ancestors spent their life building a legacy of faith, strength, and dignity. I stand in the gap this evening, thank you, to tell Dr. Mark Leonoe, his students Elizabeth, Amy, Tracy, Ben, and Stefan, and all the other students who have worked with this project, thank you. You made it possible for Dr. Leonoe to fulfill the promise he made in 2004 to the people of Unionville, to get answers to questions they had about our ancestors' life on the plantation. I remember my family had 2 questions. One was there a religious life for the enslaved? And the other was, there was a slave named Demby that Frederick Douglass writes about in his autobiography. We wanted to know, was he related to our family? The dig that they did gave us proof of our ancestors, that our ancestors did not live or die in vain. I appreciated the information because it made us discover, I appreciate the information that has been discovered because it has made my ancestors' lives more real, even though it was painful. I want to thank Mary, Richard, and Beverly Tillman for opening up their home and property for this historic undertaking. I believe it has brought real friendship and some reconciliation for many of us. When emancipation came, it set my ancestors on a course to be free, and they looked forward. They moved their families forward, and some never looked back. I believe the ancestors would be proud that we carry on the tradition of bringing families together to celebrate and honor the past. We will continue to build on that legacy. It is now our heritage, and we cannot forget the sacrifices they made to leave us a proud, strong, and peaceful people. Lastly, I want to say to the University of Maryland, please continue to find a way to fund work like this. It is important to do the work, to learn the stories, because there is life in the stories, and there can be healing in the stories. This work is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Carlene Phoenix is the next speaker. She's president of Historic Easton Incorporated. Carlene had the idea of taking an entire African-American community that was becoming derelict in Easton and using archaeology and other historical fields to make it vibrant again. Carlene, it's yours.
It just feels so great to be here. You know, I remember the very beginning, and we have this saying in our church that the first time you come into our church, you're a visitor, but after that, you're family. And that's what Dr. Mark and Tracy and Stephen and Beth and Ben, they're family. And as the president of Historic Easton, I was just so grateful that they believed in this community. I kept telling them about this hill, and you know, that it was an African-American community and it was these two churches, and I couldn't understand, like the chicken and the egg story. Why was this these two major churches that was a block away from each other? And that got the ball rolling with the archaeology on the hill, which has been 5 years now. And Historic Easton we're a partnership with the University of Maryland College Park, and it's been an honor because we develop a deep relationship. But I wanted to share with you a personal story about Frederick Douglass and the archaeology at Wye. I'm a non-Frederick Douglass family, but my family was at the Wye at the same time Frederick Douglass was. And I had the opportunity, 3 generations, myself, my daughter, and my 2 teenage granddaughters had an opportunity to walk the land where our ancestors were enslaved. And I remember knowing that at a time when I was doing my family research, my family was just names on a piece of paper. But because of archaeology, my family became a reality to me. They wasn't just names. I was able to go to that site where they lived and be able to feel the dirt and to feel the brick, all because of archaeology. I remember putting in my hands were these artifacts. I was able to see the pottery that they use, and glasses and bottles, and even picked up bones of the meats from the animals that they ate. They became unknown to known for me. The time that I went to Wye House, and I didn't see it, but there were some pictures taken. And in the background of one of the pictures that was taken was this beautiful rainbow that kind of connected me to my ancestors. They're now reality for me, they're family for me. But I wanted to say what archaeology did for me. It took my past and it brought it to my present. So now I know where they are, I've been there. And I'm so grateful for the Tillmans that they opened up their home to allow us, the ancestors of to come and be a part, to be with our family again, to be, I can't say reunited because we never met, but be united with our family. And it was all because of archaeology. Dr. Mark, thank you. I thank you so much for all that you've done, because the thing is that it's not just a job for them, it's their passion. I could see it. You know, how passionate they was, how concerned that it was, and the love that they extended to all of us. So, as Harriet stated, the work has to continue. It has to continue because what archaeology did for families, it filled a void. We had this emptiness inside of us because we just didn't know where we came from. We didn't know who we were. But for me personally, it filled that void. And I will be forever grateful to this team that came to Talbot County. Thank you.
There is one person here who does understand Frederick Douglass in Maryland and in Ireland. Our Vice President for Research, Patrick OShea, who is also President-elect of University College Cork, from whence Douglass returned here. Pat.
Provost Rankin, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. I want to thank all of you here for the wonderful work that you have done to uncover, preserve, curate, and celebrate the legacy of Frederick Douglass and his people. It's tremendous. It's personally important to me because, as Professor Leonoe said, I'm from Cork in Ireland, and there are tremendous connections between Cork and Maryland. In 1845, Frederick Douglass had just published his narrative, and he was a wanted man. There was great danger for him staying in the US, and so his advisor said, you need to head to the British Isles, to Britain and to Ireland for a couple of years until things cool down. So he sailed in the fall of 1845 for Britain, and then immediately headed to Cork, where I'm from, arriving there 171 years ago this month. And he was really delighted to be in the British Isles because he knew that the British and the Irish were very much supportive of the abolitionists in the United States. But when he got to Cork, he was shocked at what he had found, because there he found white people, Irish Catholics, who lived in a country in whose governance they could not fully participate, who spoke a language they could not read, and who worked land that they could not own. Okay? It was not a pleasant situation that he found. He met with the people who were working for the emancipation and the freedom of the Irish Catholics. And when he left Ireland, he was a changed person because he realized it was not a single issue of freedom for the American slave. It was an issue of universal human rights, of gender rights, of religious rights, of freedom for us all. And so as a result of his time in Ireland, Frederick Douglass became really the first universal advocate for human rights in a universal sense. So the statue that we have out there is Douglass as he would have been in Ireland as a young man. That statue was conceived in Ireland, it was sculpted in England, and it is now at home in Maryland. And so, you know, Douglass was there in October 1845. That was the beginning of the Great Famine. Millions have died. The population of County Cork is 300,000 less today than it was when Frederick Douglass was there. The place has not yet recovered. So there are a lot of parallels between what happened here, what happened there. Just as we're doing archaeological digs on the Eastern Shore, there are also people doing from University of Maryland and students doing archaeological digs in Cork, looking at the conditions that the Irish lived during that time. And when Frederick Douglass was in Cork, they were planning to build a university because Catholics could not attend university at the time, so they decided they were going to build a university. And they did that during the famine. They felt just as Douglass did, but that education meant freedom. And so on February the 1st, I will become president of that university, University College Cork, and I will, thank you. And I will be, sitting in limestone rooms that were built by poor Irish people as part of a works program for them. And the first president of the university, Robert Kane, was actually the head of the famine relief group in Ireland in the 1840s. So he then, went from that to become the president of the university. So the connections run deep. It's not just me and Frederick Douglass. There's one other person I want to mention who's connected. There was a young girl named Mary Harris, who would have seen and heard Douglass in Cork at that time. She emigrated to the United States, married a man named Jones, became known as Mary Jones, and by 1900 she was the most dangerous woman in America. You've heard of Mother Jones, the great labor advocate. Well, she came here to Maryland. A mile outside this campus, she died in 1930. There's a historic marker to Mother Jones. There was an elementary school just off our campus named after Mother Jones. So this cycle of life, this arc of the universe, is very interesting. So the arc of my career will now take me back to where it began, to this crucible of human rights advocacy, which has been so important to us all. So thank you for everything you have done. And let us give Frederick Douglass a round of applause for everything he did. He gave us our freedoms today. Thank you. And thank you, Mark. Thank you very much.